Hello and welcome back. So, today we're going to be talking about one of my favorite modalities within TCM or traditional Chinese medicine, and that is food therapy. Did you know that traditional Chinese medicine has its own system of food therapy? Well, if you didn't, stick around. We're going to get into it. When we think about food, we usually think about calories, proteins, carbohydrates, vitamins, minerals, and all the things we've learned from modern nutrition. But Chinese medicine has another way of looking at food. And if you hear some ruckus in the background, my mom and my son are playing in the living room. The Five Element Kitchen is a family kitchen. It's a real kitchen, and real life is going on. So sometimes, the environment is not always going to be pristinely quiet when I do some of these videos, and I may even have a little a little sous chef in the kitchen with me sometimes. So if you hear a little bit of giggling and baby squeals going on, that's what it is. But let's go ahead and continue. So in TCM, we consider things like the thermal nature of food. We consider things like its flavor, how it's prepared, the season we're in, and most importantly, the individual who's eating the food. So food isn't simply categorized as good or bad necessarily. There is maybe one exception. I would say cold is usually considered bad in TCM, but we'll talk about that later. Um, Instead, we're asking, what does this particular food do? And is that effect appropriate for this particular person and their current pattern? That's one of the things I love about Chinese food therapy. It takes something we do every single day, eating, and it looks at how we can use it in an intentional way and as part of a supporting, healthy, and balanced part of your lifestyle. And that's something that we're going to explore a lot here in the Five Element Kitchen, on the Five Element Kitchen channel, is things that promote that kind of healthfulness and balance in our lives. So, what do the five elements actually have to do with what you're eating? So, the five elements are wood, fire, earth, metal, and water. And they are part of a larger framework that Chinese medicine uses to understand relationships within the body and between the body and the environment. And each element has associations with particular seasons, flavors, organ systems, physiological functions, patterns, and even emotions, believe it or not. If you want to get deep into TCM psychology, or maybe not deep, but if you want to touch on some TCM psychology, that's definitely something I can do here in on the channel. And food can be understood through that same framework. But I want to make an important distinction because there's a lot of five element information online that turns into almost like a personality quiz, like like some of those horoscopes that are just kind of like broad and um, impersonal. You're a wood person, so you should eat these five foods that are for wood people. Or traditional Chinese food therapy is much more nuanced than that. And we're looking at the person's overall pattern. We're looking at their constitution, their symptoms, their digestion, the season, and what their body may need right now. So the five elements can give us a beautiful framework, but that framework is not meant to put you into a little box, okay? So here's why I don't believe in giving everyone the same exact TCM diet, if I could even call one diet that. In Chinese medicine, two people can have the exact same symptom and potentially need completely different approaches. So let's say two people both have digestive problems. So one person might have signs of cold, deficiency, while another person might have more signs of heat or stagnation. They're both experiencing digestive symptoms though, but their underlying patterns may be completely different. So instead of saying everybody with this symptom needs to eat these 10 foods, Chinese medicine asks us to look at the individual as a whole. What's happening with their digestion? How is their energy? Are they experiencing heat or cold? What are their bowel habits? What is their appetite like? What's happening with their sleep, their stress, their overall health? Then we use that information to develop a more individualized approach. And that's one of the things I really appreciate about I appreciate this about TCM, is because the person matters just as much as the symptom, and that's absolutely how I approach treatment in the clinic here. I look at everyone's individual pattern, not just the symptoms, because as you can see, the symptom is just the beginning, but we're looking at the deeper aspects of what is actually making this person present with those symptoms. So, what would it actually look like to use Chinese food therapy in your everyday life? So, that's actually one of the reasons I created the 5 element reset. The 5 element reset is an online TCM focused wellness session where where we look at your individual constitution and patterns and use that information to develop practical food and lifestyle strategies. And I want to emphasize the word practical. I'm not interested in giving you a giant list of foods that you're not allowed to eat. I don't live that way. I'm not interested in putting you on some extremely restrictive diet. Again, I don't live that way, so I'm not trying to do that to anybody else. I want to help you understand your body through the lens of Chinese medicine and then give you tools that you can realistically incorporate into your everyday life. That might involve food choices, meal preparation, daily routines, seasonal practices, or other lifestyle recommendations based on your individual needs. That's what we'll go over in the session. And that's what we'll learn over time as we continue. And that's really the philosophy behind 5 Element Kitchen as a whole. Learning how to work with your body in practical, everyday ways, because that's when you see the results in the everyday choices that you make. So, one of the biggest misconceptions about food therapy is that if a food is healthy, it must be healthy for everyone. But that's not always the case. So, let's talk about it. Of course, there are foods that have well established nutritional benefits scientifically, but Chinese medicine asks a slightly different question. It asks, what is the food doing within this particular person's body? That's why something like a smoothie might be a great choice for one person, but not feel so great for someone else. Or why cooked foods might be emphasized for someone whose digestion seems particularly sensitive. And then maybe uh, raw foods or, maybe less intensely cooked foods may be great for another person. It doesn't mean one person is right and the other person is wrong. It means we're looking at food through a different lens. And I think that's where food therapy gets really interesting.